Hi everyone! Now that it is early September and we are just under 2 months away from our first frost date, now is the time for us to start sowing the very last things for our fall garden. Today I'm going to be going around the garden and trying to find little spots to sow these different things, and here are the seeds I'm going to be planting. First I have a couple of different kinds of lettuce. The first one is kind of like a romaine type lettuce, and this one is called tennis ball lettuce. It just makes like a really small mini head. And then I also have some spinach that I want to sow. This is a spinach that's supposed to be good for overwintering because it's pretty cold hardy. And then I also have just like a standard red radish. These are the smaller radishes. I've already planted winter radishes that are out in my garden growing right now. Things like daikon radish and China rose radishes, those are larger ones, so they take a little bit longer to grow. And the last thing I have is tatsoi, which is a leafy green that's supposed to be really cold hardy, so I'm hoping that we can grow this into the winter. This is our first time growing this. Now that we have our seeds ready, we have to go into the garden and find some areas to plant these. And this point of the season is always a really full time where it's hard to actually find spots that are open to plant all these things. All of our warm weather stuff is still in the ground. So I'm really just going to go around the garden and try and squeeze them into any spot I can find and clean up some areas to make space as well. So here I am in between two of our trellis areas, and our sunflowers have really run their course and they're looking pretty ragged and not putting on a lot of new blooms. So I'm deciding to just take them out now. And this is going to open up some space close to the ground for us to plant seeds, but cutting these stalks down is also just going to allow for more sunlight to come through as well, which is really good for the seeds to grow and also just for the flowers that I have around this area that are growing as well. By the way, I thought I'd just mention that our first frost date is around October 22nd, so if yours is a similar time, then you can also be planting these things right now. But if yours is later, you still have time to plant other longer season things like carrots, those winter radishes I mentioned, and maybe even some brassicas like cabbages and broccoli. While I was cleaning up this area, I decided to just deadhead some of these echinacea. I've actually been leaving them because goldfinches really love to eat the seed heads, and if I take these out, you can see that the seeds are actually completely gone from these because they have been feasting on them. So now that they're all done, I'm going to just cut them off and just clean this up and make it look a little neater. So that's just a little tip. If you have echinacea in your garden, you might want to just leave those heads there for a little bit so that the birds can enjoy them. Now that the area is cleaned up a little bit, I'm going to go towards the back trellis, and this is the trellis where we have our winter melons. We've already harvested a couple of these, and there's one that's ready to harvest today. You know when these are ready to harvest when they develop that white chalky exterior on the outside, and this is the coating that actually helps these gourds to preserve all throughout the winter. And I'm really happy with how beautiful that melon is. By the way, you'll definitely want to wear gloves when harvesting these because there are little hairs on the outside that can prick your skin. Now turning towards the base of this trellis, which is where we're going to be doing our actual planting, I have this nice big area that's not being used because these plants were being trellised upwards and they're not putting on a lot of leafy growth right now either, so I know that these plants are not going to get shaded out. These melon plants are probably going to come out soon anyway. There's only one melon that's still developing there, so that will also provide more sun as fall comes along. And I'm just going to make two little trenches right in front of this trellis, and I can space them fairly closely because here I'm going to be planting some of those small radishes and they're not going to get really large, so I'm just going to try and space them maybe 1 or 2 inches apart. I'm trying to go a little more sparse here so that I don't have to come in later and thin those out. And like I mentioned, if your frost date is a little bit later than ours, some other things that would be really good to plant right now are carrots, beets, winter radishes. The ones I'm planting today, the packet says that they take 24 days to be ready to harvest. But one thing you want to keep in mind if you're planting in the fall is to just add at least a week or 2 of time to the number of days that these things will take to produce because the days are getting shorter and the weather is getting cooler as well. So things might take just a little bit longer to get to maturity. So I'm just going to cover these lightly and try not to get too much of that mulch in there so that the seeds can come up okay. And meanwhile, I want to go to the other side of the trellis just to show you that I already planted some carrots a few weeks ago and those are coming up nicely. These take a little longer, which is why I did these earlier, and those are looking pretty good, but they probably need to be thinned soon. Next, I have a small spot where I cut down those sunflowers. And this space I really have been reserving for flowers to bring in pollinators to our vegetable garden throughout the year, but now that I don't have more flowers to plant that will be blooming in time for the fall, I figure I might as well put some vegetables in here to use up that space. And again, I'm just going to be making some trenches, and here I'm going to be planting those couple of different kinds of lettuce. I'm going to do 2 rows of the romaine lettuce and 1 row of the tennis ball lettuce. And I'm going to sow these pretty thick because if they come up thick, then I can just harvest them as baby greens and salad mixes. And then as they start to need more space and they get bigger, I can thin out entire plants so that I can get whole heads of lettuce later on. And you can see here that I really don't need a lot of space to find little areas in the garden to plant each of these things. In this one space where I had just a couple of sunflowers, I cleared up enough room to grow a ton of lettuce. And even though I don't have entire beds open right now where I can dedicate a lot of space to these things, you'll still be able to grow a lot of food from these small spaces. And when you're planting things for the fall, timing is so critical because if you wait too long, then that first frost is going to come and it's just going to be too cold for anything to grow. And if I had waited until all of our warm weather stuff was ready to come out of our beds, it would be too late for us to try and plant these things. So here's this finished area. It looks a lot better with a lot of those dead flowers cleared out, and it feels good to know that we have seeds in the ground that are ready to grow and keep producing food for us into the fall. We're going to move on to one other small little area that I think I'm going to be able to squeeze in some seeds. This is in one of our raised beds that has our arch trellis with our tomatillos, and in front of that we have some pepper plants, but they have not been doing very well this year. This was a second planting that I had to start from seed after our first ones died in a late frost, and they just have been looking really sad. I've gotten only 1 single pepper from each of these. In front of those, I did come in a few weeks ago and plant in some carrots, so you can see those starting to come up as well, but there's still some space right underneath the pepper plants that I think I'll be able to use, especially because those peppers are not putting on a lot of leafy growth, so I think a lot of sunlight can get through still to the soil. And anyway, I might just have to pull out those pepper plants if they look like they're not going to be producing anymore. I'm just going to clean up this area a little bit. Those tomatillo plants are going pretty crazy and mostly they're growing upwards. I actually found a couple of tomatillos that were ready to harvest, which is pretty fun. But anyway, the tomatillo plants do have a couple of branches that are growing a little more horizontally that aren't producing any fruit, so I figured I would just prune those off. And it's pretty crazy what just a quick small prune can do to clean up a space and make it look so much better, and this is really going to help allow more sunlight to let those seeds germinate. Again, I'm just going to make a couple of trenches at the base of these plants, and here I'm going to be doing a row of spinach in the front and then 2 rows of those tatsoi seeds. Another tip for sowing in the fall is to try and time your plantings so that you can do it right before a rainy day or evening. I know that we are going to be getting rain the evening after I plant these things, and it's also going to be raining the entire day afterwards, and this is really going to settle them in and keep them moist while they germinate. So anyway, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a little bit of everything today. I hope this reminds you to get your fall seeds into your garden as well, and we'll see you again in the next video.